Hey friends, welcome to Sabbath School Daily, where we have been studying from this lesson right here, Ephesians. This week we're studying from lesson number 1. It's the first lesson of this quarter, so if you haven't studied yet, you still have time to catch up. The title of this week's lesson is Paul and the Ephesians, and today is Wednesday's lesson, which has the title Ephesians in its Time. So here what we have is really the book, again, the author of the lesson is giving us a foundation off to which we can study the book in true, right, in reality. So what he mentions here in the lesson today is that the fact that Paul identifies himself as the author of the book of Ephesians several times throughout the book makes it clear that, well, he wants to be identified as the author of this book. The reason why I say that is because there are several scholars today in Christianity that say that it was not Paul that wrote the book, that it was someone else at a later period in time, and that I do not subscribe to that idea at all. To me, it's very clear that Paul did write this book. There is sufficient archaeological and literature evidence, historical literature evidence, to support that understanding. And so, yes, it is Paul, in my opinion, that wrote the book of Ephesians. I just has to be said, all right? Maybe you would never even guess to question that, but just know that that's the reality that we face in our world today, that there are so many people that call themselves Christians and call into question the authorship of many of these books that very clearly were written by the people who say that they wrote the book. Another aspect of today's lesson is it's something that I mentioned previously. Now, I told you, I believe that it was on Sabbath's lesson, that there are two main reasons why Paul is writing this book. First of all, is because the church in Ephesus, they were being severely persecuted. They were going through harrowing experiences of persecution, of trials. Because of this, they were being abandoned and betrayed by family members, by friends. So they were extremely discouraged. And additionally, Paul was in jail. Paul was in prison. And so we know that this is on his mind because, for example, in Ephesians chapter 3, verse 13, it says, "Therefore I ask you that you do not lose heart at my tribulations for you, which is your glory." So here you see that Paul he's worried for them because of this. He doesn't want them to be worried for him. He knows if there's one thing that we really get from Paul is a certainty. Paul was certain of who he was, of who he worshiped, of who he followed, and what the outcome of his story would be. He was certain. Paul knew if there's something that you never see in Paul is uncertainty. This man was unbendable, right? It's just, Paul was so strong, and it's something that I find so much encouragement in it, and I admire him so much for that. Of course, he was human. Of course, he had his moments, I'm sure. We see a moment where he asks God to free him of a thorn, but still, you see in Paul this man that was just so resilient. And that's because he found the peace that God grants, the peace that surpasses all understanding, all circumstances, and all obstacles. So here he's encouraging them he's writing from prison, encouraging them not to be discouraged because of his tribulations, because it's for your glory. So again, this speaks a little bit to the character of this man. Here you also see that the book, it kind of goes in line with other epistles that were written from prison, such as Colossians and Philemon. And so here Paul, he doesn't really go into the specifics of the context of Ephesus and the church of Ephesians per se, but he does write in broad strokes the universal outlines of what it means to be church and what they're going through. In the words of the lesson, this is in the last paragraph of the lesson, he writes this, or the author of the lesson writes this. In Ephesians, Paul offers few specifics about the situation of his audience in Ephesus. The scope of his attention is wide. He deals with a grand span of time, beginning with God's decision made before the foundation of the world, that appears in Ephesians 1, verse 4, and reflects broadly on grand themes of God's salvation offered in Christ. In doing so, the letter exhibits an exalted literary style with long sentences, repetitive expressions, and developed metaphors. Paul can use such a style elsewhere, but it is concentrated in Ephesians, which features a great deal of praise, prayer, and worship language, and offers carefully crafted, highly rhetorical passages. So that's what we can expect in this book. He's not going into the details. So, for example, in the books of, in the letters of Corinthians, you see that he mentions specifics. He talks about situations happening there. In Ephesians, that doesn't happen so much. He's talking about the grand scheme, right? The world as it's going through. He's talking about deep illustrations of God and the church. So it's a very beautiful book for that reason. Not that the other ones are not beautiful, but this is very specific to the book of Ephesians. So don't forget to study your lesson. It'll give you more details about the book of Ephesians. Also, please remember to share, to like, to subscribe to our channel. We release one video every day, and I hope to see you again here tomorrow for another study of Sabbath School Daily.